Businesses don't often fail because of economic problems, financial challenges, or production issues. They fail because people can't agree on what to do about these problems, challenges, and issues. In fact, a friend of mine once told me, every problem is a people problem. He's right. But a lot of us are much more comfortable tackling production issues and even economic and financial challenges than we are people problems. It's no wonder. Growing up, we learn how to work livestock and do the physical work of ranching. No one ever teaches us how to effectively build and lead a team or effectively address conflict. And yet, as important as it is to know how to project cash flow and calculate gross margins and pick the right enterprises and structure them so they fit the environment, it's the people skills as much as, and probably more than anything else, that determine the long-term success of a business. There's a lesson I learned a long time ago about working effectively with people that I'm going to share with you. And it's actually not just about working with people. What I'm going to describe has as much to do with healthy, happy family relationships as it does effective business relationships. I learned this from a wonderful organization called the Arbinger Institute. Ever heard the term horribilizing? Horribilizing. We have a tendency in many of our personal and business relationships to horribilize people, and it poisons relationships. Here's what happens. Let's say someone says or does something, and you see or hear what they say or do. That leads you to say or do something. Except what you say or do isn't in reaction to what you saw or heard. No, it's in reaction to the story you told yourself about why they said or did the thing that you saw or heard. And the story we tell ourselves is the worst possible story imaginable. Here's an example. Let's say someone shows up late for work. It's the third time this week they've been late. That's what they did. It's what I saw. So I tell myself a story. They're always late. By the way, anytime you use words like never or always, we're probably telling ourselves a story. They're always late. They don't care about work. They figure I'll cover for them. They don't care that puts me in a tough spot. They're so selfish. They never think of anyone but themselves. And so it goes. Now that leads me to say or do something, not in response to what I saw or heard, but in response to the story that I told myself. Now, of course, they see or hear what I say or do, and then, yeah, you guessed it, they tell themselves a story, and it's the worst possible story they can tell about me. Of course, that leads them to say or do something, and then I see or hear what they say or... We portray ourselves as pure victims, and the other person is a pure villain. Now, I'm not proud to say it, but I've done this. I've horribilized people. I think most of us probably have. Even the people we love. And it poisons relationships. It creates unnecessary conflict. It leads to resentment, and it eats us up. I've heard it put this way. Holding on to resentment is like taking poison and expecting someone else to die. The relationship suffers, but we're the ones that are most harmed by the stories we tell. Stories that we aren't even aware that we're telling ourselves. And that's the key, becoming aware that we're telling ourselves a story. Because it doesn't have to be this way. There is a moment between the time we see or hear what someone says or does when we can choose. We have to be self-aware enough to recognize that we're telling ourselves a story so that we can tell ourselves a different story. A story about why an otherwise caring, reasonable person would have said or done the thing that we saw or heard. In this case, our alternative story might be something like, I wonder if there's a problem at home. I wonder if the kids are sick. I hope everybody's okay. Now, can you imagine how this story might change what you say or do? If you responded by saying, is everyone okay at home? Are the kids all right? They might respond, yeah, everyone's all right. I overslept again. Okay, now you can have a conversation about the problem. This isn't about letting people get away with stuff. They aren't going to get off the hook. People need to be held accountable. But rather than jumping to conclusions and making assumptions and telling ourselves stories and building resentment, there are healthy ways to get to the truth and hold people accountable. Horribilizing doesn't help anyone. Just the opposite. It poisons relationships and it harms us most of all. So, in that moment between what you see or hear and your response, recognize that you're telling yourself a story and tell yourself a different story. You're more likely to get to the truth, and in the process, you'll feel better, have healthier relationships, and healthy relationships at work and home are an essential part of ranching for profit.